This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Before Rise of Skywalker, before any of the production trouble associated with it, before J.J. Abrams was even attached to direct it, Colin Trevorrow was intended to direct the third movie of the trilogy, Duel of the Fates. Thanks to Robert Meyer Burnett, we learned of it and what the plan for it was. Duel of the Fates was the original intended sequel to The Last Jedi, and with it, the trilogy would have made sense. It still wouldn't have been the trilogy fans wanted, but at least it would have been a trilogy, which is something the current Disney trilogy arguably is not. They are 3 movies, yes, but they are not a trilogy, in that the third movie we ended up getting had to start a brand new story because of The Last Jedi. The fault for that lies squarely with Lucasfilm and with Kathleen Kennedy. In this video, I will argue why Disney's sequel trilogy is not a trilogy, how easily it could have been a trilogy, and why Kathleen Kennedy chose the worst possible course of action when dealing with the premature passing of Carrie Fischer. Because of Kathleen Kennedy's mismanagement, the Star Wars brand value has taken a massive hit, and Disney Plus exclusive series like The Mandalorian and the upcoming Obi-Wan will have to keep the brand afloat. While the platform is slowly rolling out in more and more countries, a lot of audiences across the globe still has no legal way of seeing such exclusive content restricted to specific online streaming services. Unless they use VPN, that is, which is something this video sponsor, Surfshark, just so happens to deliver. First and foremost, a VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which guarantees instant online safety. Surfshark encrypts all the data sent via the internet, so that no one can obtain usernames, logins, passwords, private messages, or steal content or other sensitive data. And make no mistake about it, there are those who are looking to get your data, especially out there on the high seas. Now, to be clear, no one here condones you being on the high seas in the first place. Going hunting for pirate treasure is wrong, even if, that's where VPN really comes in handy. But VPN also provides a far better alternative, as Surfshark allows you to change the country you access the internet from, which in turn allows you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions. That way, you can subscribe to a whole host of online streaming services which may be restricted to certain regions, and thus obtain their exclusive content to your own registered profile no matter where you physically may be located. An additional advantage with Surfshark over many other VPN providers is that it allows one account to be used on multiple devices, like your stationary computer, your laptop, your smartphone, your tablet, and any other device you might have. But there's more. Surfshark sponsors this video, so we have a deal for you. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive deal in which you get 83% off the normal list price, plus 1 extra month for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Do check out the link in the description below for further details. And with that out of the way, let's get back to how Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm, and Disney all dropped the ball worse than any ball has ever been dropped before. A trilogy is a set of 3 works of art that are connected, and that can be seen either as a single work or as 3 individual works. So it's not just 3 movies in a row, there has to be thematic connectivity between them. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a trilogy. The original trilogy is a trilogy. The prequel trilogy is a trilogy. Revenge of the Sith, Rogue One, and A New Hope batched together are not a trilogy, but 3 Star Wars movies that take place after one another. This too is the relation between Disney Star Wars sequel movies. They are 3 Star Wars movies that take place after one another. While they feature the same cast, there are no thematic ties connecting all 3 beyond the surface level resistance. The Force Awakens set the themes, story, and characters up. The Last Jedi carried the characters forward, but did a 180-degree turn thematically, and de facto ended the story by closing off so many of the plot seeds planted in The Force Awakens. The Rise of Skywalker then proceeded to revert to the themes of The Force Awakens, but set up a brand new story, as the story seeds planted by The Last Jedi died on the vine, alongside Carrie Fischer. What you are left with is 3 Star Wars movies that take place in a row, but with no real thematic ties between them. They will forever be called a trilogy for marketing purposes, and they were indeed intended to be a trilogy. But really, it's a misnomer. But it didn't have to be this way. By the looks of it, Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates would have thematically connected to both The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, leaving us with an uneven trilogy, but a trilogy nonetheless. But that was not the path taken. More than that, it was a path that could not be taken in light of Carrie Fisher's untimely passing, which is what really threw the wrench into the machinery. Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm could not have handled it worse than they did. You could argue that things went sideways the moment Rian Johnson signed on with the intention of subverting everything J.J. Abrams set up in The Force Awakens, and with the Kathleen Kennedy-sanctioned mission of killing the past and scolding the audience for idolizing heroes of the past like Luke Skywalker. You wouldn't be wrong in arguing that. But Colin Trevorrow knew what Rian Johnson was doing, and his script incorporated it all and salvaged it as good as anyone could have. Short of having Luke wake up from a Force-induced nightmare and letting the audience know the previous movie was but a bad dream. However, Trevorrow's script rode on LEIA having an important part in it, and the subsequent assumption that Carrie Fisher would be alive and well to shoot the critical scenes the movie could not do without. On December 26th of 2016, days after the script for Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates was completed, Carrie Fisher died. When that happened, Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates could no longer be made, not in the form it was envisioned. At that point, The Last Jedi had finished filming, but it was still almost a year away from release. Lucasfilm had a choice to make, and Kathleen Kennedy was the one with the executive power to make it. Keep in mind, when Carrie Fisher died, The Last Jedi was already filmed, but still a year away from release. What they had filmed was Luke dying and Leia living, her being the titular Last Jedi who would carry the torch into the next movie. A torch Carrie Fisher was no longer alive to carry, but Mark Hamill was. They had a year to make whatever changes they saw fit, and the most obvious one would have been to have Luke live and Leia die. Since a near-death scene featuring Leia was even filmed, doing so would have been, to again quote a favorite series of mine, super easy, barely an inconvenience. All they had to do was allow Leia to graciously die in the vacuum of space. In the process, they would have saved us all from that horrid Mary Poppins sequence, which has got to be one of the single worst scenes in any Star Wars iteration this side of the Christmas special. Then they'd simply have to cut her from the rest of the movie and reshoot the few scenes she couldn't outright be cut from. It would have required no more extensive reshoots than any normal pickup that any blockbuster movies do on a routine basis anyway. Saving Luke would have been even easier. Just cut the scene where he is Force floating 1 second before he Force drops dead and Force disappears. That would have been it. That way, Leia would have received a worthy send-off in an emotional death scene, while Luke would live to be redeemed another day. Doing so would have taken, at most, 2 weeks worth of reconfiguring on The Last Jedi, and 1 rewrite to switch Luke and Leia's roles in Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates, which probably would have been all the better for it. This was the simple, obvious, and self-evident course of action, but it wasn't the only one on the table. The other option was finish up The Last Jedi as envisioned and filmed, meaning Luke dies and Leia lives, and then kick the problem of Carrie Fischer not being around to film any of the required scenes in the third movie down the road. This was the option they chose. Rian Johnson was no doubt thrilled about that, as his vision survived Carrie Fisher's death, and he got bragging rights that his movie didn't have to endure any of the reshoots and reconfigurations that both The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker underwent. But if it was one movie that needed reshoots and reconfiguring, then in light of Carrie Fisher's passing, it was his. The blame for the fact that it didn't falls squarely on the shoulders of Kathleen Kennedy. The Force Awakens was very much so the sum of the visions of Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, and J.J. Abrams. Iger rejected George Lucas' original sequel trilogy treatments because they introduced too many new concepts, while Iger wanted Disney Star Wars to be firmly rooted, both tonally and visually, in the molds of the original trilogy. Kathleen Kennedy, I have been told, wanted to use Star Wars as a means to disseminate her firmly held beliefs and convictions on social justice, in order to, in her mind, better the world. J.J. Abrams did his best to incorporate all of this into the best movie he could. It worked. Audiences flocked to the movie, which became one of the biggest hits of all time. I have been told that this success gave Iger confidence in Kennedy, so much so that he stepped back from the making of the sequel. On The Last Jedi, then, there was no Iger to ensure that the original trilogy was celebrated and respected. Instead, there was Kennedy, who is all about activism, and Rian Johnson, who is all about subversion and activism. The end result was that The Last Jedi became all about killing the past, killing Luke Skywalker, and killing his legacy. From what I have been told, Kathleen Kennedy wasn't about to let a minor inconvenience like Carrie Fisher dying detract from this most sacred of missions, so no changes were made to The Last Jedi. Colin Trevorrow would just have to sort it out. But Colin Trevorrow couldn't sort it out. With Luke dead on film and Carrie Fisher dead in reality, there was no salvaging this, and that apparently is why he dropped out. The Last Jedi is also the point where all Star Wars associated revenue suddenly dropped like a stone, so Iger personally stepped back in to control a situation Kathleen Kennedy so obviously wasn't capable of. That is what led to The Rise of Skywalker. In retrospect, now having seen what Colin Trevorrow had planned, how easily those plans could have been preserved by switching the roles of Luke and Leia, and how much better a trilogy we all could have gotten for it, we see how bad Kathleen Kennedy's mismanagement of Star Wars really has been. The sheer amount of production trouble, failed hirings, and subsequent firings that have happened under her watch is eye-watering. But in my opinion, Kathleen Kennedy's single greatest mistake was failing to integrate Carrie Fisher's untimely death into The Last Jedi, especially in light of how easily it could have been done. Her failure to act in that pivotal situation, in my opinion, is what broke Star Wars. But that is just my opinion. Tell me yours in the comments. And before you go, remember to head on over to this video's sponsor, Surfshark, and use the promo code MIDNIGHT to get 83% off the normal list price, plus 1 extra month free of Surfshark VPN. Link is in the description.